Now at this point, we're actually going to deploy this application to the live web. And in this context, what we're going to do is put the source code of this Hello app under version control. So version control lets us track changes to an application, recover from errors, collaborate with other people, and so on. It's a very powerful kind of software. And specifically, we're going to be using Git, which is the version control system that's really won, at least in the Ruby world, and lots of other places too. I think Git really is the version control system of choice for most people these days. And in the present context, one of the biggest things that Git will give us is the ability to deploy our application with a single command to a service called Heroku. So let me show you how that works. I should mention that at this point you might have to install Git if it's not already on your system. But if you're using the Cloud IDE, it comes installed for free. You can check that using the which command. Which Git tells you where it is. And because this is a new workspace, I need to add some configuration. So I'm going to do git config. Oops, it's a --global. Of course, you should type your name here, not mine. You need to know your email address. I should mention in this context that if you're going to push this to a publicly accessible repository, this address will be exposed. So make sure just to know that. People will be able to track you down. So there it is. By the way, don't use this address if you're going to email me about the Rails tutorial. I usually use admin@railstutorial.org for that sort of stuff. This is just a little future-proofing for a future version of Git. And don't worry if these look kind of complicated. You think, I'm never going to remember all this stuff if I need to configure a new system. Like, I literally use the Rails tutorial. I look this up every time I need to configure a new system. And I think, well, where is this? Oh, I know where it is. It's in chapter 1 of the Rails tutorial. So don't feel bad about it if you think this is too complicated. I'm going to set up an alias here. It's a very common operation in Git. It's called a checkout, and checkout's kind of long, so I'm going to alias it to CO because everyone uses Git CO instead of checkout. All right, so that's the one-time setup. And at this point, I'm going to initialize the repository. So this is has to be done once per repository. So the repository is just essentially the collection of files that that you see here in this file navigator in the context of being under version control with Git. So the way to initialize a repository is with git init. And now we need to add all the files. And that's git add -a, capital A. You might be concerned at this point if you've used Git before that it might be remembering or it might be storing under version control configuration files or log files or things that we don't want stored. But in fact, Rails comes with what's called a .gitignore file. This is a list of files and patterns that the Git will ignore. So I'm going to show hidden files just to show you how to find this thing. And now, let's see where it is. Where is it? Config. Oh, I probably need to refresh it. There we go. And so you can see here the gitignore that gets generated by Rails new. And you can add to this. If you know about Git, you can feel free to add to that. I'm not going to bother for the most part in this tutorial. It's a little more advanced than we're doing here. So anyway, I've added the files, and at this point I can see what that did with git status. You can do this here. So you can see it just added a bunch of files. And so now I'm going to actually make those changes permanent in the sense of actually storing these changes as a single set of operations called a commit. Oops, what happened there? Oh, I see. It wasn't actually. I needed to click in the window. Git commit -m for the message, and I pretty much always just say initialize repository for the first commit message. Now we can just do git log and see what happened there. And so the commit is has this long identifying string, and then it has the commit message, initialize repository. I just want to give you one example of the kind of thing that Git does for you. So at this point, we can say git status, and there's nothing to commit. But what happens if I remove this directory? If I say I just remove the app, say app controllers. By the way, this is the remove command in Unix, rm, and r is recursive, meaning it's going to delete all the subdirectories, it's going to remove all the subdirectories, and f, it means force, which means it basically says, don't ask me for confirmation, just do it. And now, these were important files. I mean, if you look here, just reloading it, and oops, it didn't work, right? I've just broken I've just destroyed it. I mean, I've destroyed the most important files. But Git lets you recover really easily from things like this. To git status, and it tells me the things that were deleted, but what I can do at this point is to check out basically the previous version using the -f or force flag. It's basically the same design as this. Instead of this is a -f here for force. Git checkout -f. Actually, you can do -force. This is a long version, and the short version would be like this. Remember, we set up the alias. It's the same thing though. You can see now it's clean, and if I go back here, oh, it's working again. So this is the sort of thing that can really save you when you make a mistake. Once you have your application under version control, it's a really good idea to push it up to a remote repository somewhere, which is it's a good way to create a backup essentially, and also to add collaborators later on if you want. And sometimes it's just convenient to navigate the commits and so on using a web interface. So we're going to be using a service called Bitbucket. This is one of the two big Git repository hosts out there. The other one is GitHub. GitHub is excellent, and in fact was used in the previous versions of this tutorial. The issue is that I now believe it's important for web application repositories to be private by default, because all kinds of things can go wrong if you expose a repo publicly. You can have things like passwords or secure keys, private keys that get exposed accidentally. And the way that Bitbucket is designed is that you can have private repositories at GitHub too, but they're free at Bitbucket. There are an unlimited number of free repositories. You have to pay if you want collaborators, but we're not going to need collaborators in this tutorial, so we're just going to use Bitbucket for its free repos. We can start by going to bitbucket.org. And I'm going to log in. Of course, you should create an account if you don't have one yet. And at this point, I do want to create a repository. And let's call it Hello App. You can see here, access level, this is a private repository. So that's the key. It's really important that this be private in general. So I'm going to create the repository. And now you can see it says I have an existing project. This will not actually work though, because in order to use this with Cloud9, I need to give Bitbucket what's called my private key. So let me show you how that works. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to give it my public key. So this is a public key cryptography. So there's a private key and a public key. So I need to tell Bitbucket my public key. And so what we're going to do to find that is click around. I'm actually doing this live in the sense that I don't remember offhand how to do this. So this is the kind of thing that I just want to show you how you might figure this sort of thing out. Let's see. Deployment keys. That looks promising. I'm going to add a key here. There we go. And it even tells us copy your key to your clipboard. This part will not work on the Cloud IDE, but this will. So let's try this. I'm going to copy that. Go over here. Here's the key. So here's the public key. Let's copy it. And let's call this Cloud9. Paste it in. There we go. And so now we can go back to our repository. Let's take, where is it here? And I have an existing project, because we do have a project. And let's see, cd path to my repo, we already are in the path. Okay, so we need to do this. Git remote add origin. Oop, actually we should refresh this though. I think that it's going to change. No, it did not. Why did it not change? We just added the settings. Deployment keys. It's weird. Will this work? We'll find out. I expected it to say something different. So let's start with this. Okay, and git push-u origin. Now see, this did not work. This is annoying, but this is, I think the benefit of doing it live is that you'll see that you'll see how to recover from something like this. All right, so it should not be prompting me for a password. So what I'm going to do is, I think there's another global setting. I think it's under manage account. Here it is. I think it's this. There's actually a second place to put the key. Oops. Oops, still the wrong thing. This is called jump cut, by the way. Incredibly useful. If you're on OS 10, it stores a bunch of things that were in your buffer. So let's add this key. Yeah. So now it's complaining that I already have registered it. It's probably because of the repo that's registered it. So let's go here, settings, and we wanted to go to deployment keys. Let's delete this. Part of the philosophy of this series is really to show you how things are in the real world, and this is how it goes sometimes. So now, let's see if this works. Add key. There we go, so that worked. Now let's go back to our repository. Yeah, so this is what I expected. So here you can see that it says has this, the address starts with HTTPS, but here it starts with git at bitbucket.org. So it's a different, actually it might complain that the remote already exists too. Let's take a look at this. Okay, remote origin already exists. So let's see if we can guess the answer. What do you think? It's delete? Git remote remove. Git remote remove origin. And now let's try this again. Ah, that worked. Cool. Really, half of dealing with computers is just guessing the answer like that. Now I'm going to push up the repository. I tried to do this before. It's really not that important to understand what these commands do exactly. I mean, we're just following Bitbucket's lead. Now I'm going to say yes. I'm sure I want to continue connecting, but I only have to do that once. It will just work the next time, even for a different repo. Okay. And now it says to do this, but this is only necessary if you have what are called tags, and there are no tags in this tutorial. In fact, I rarely use tags. Probably should use them more. But in any case, we can skip this last line. It doesn't do any harm, though. Just paste it in. In fact, you can just add the whole thing. You can include the comment. So this doesn't do anything, but just goes to show that, oh, that's weird. I'm kind of surprised that it asked me. Well, we're about to test that. I really think it shouldn't be asking me if I want to continue connecting, but we'll find out in a moment because we're going to use Git to actually do something useful. All right, if we look at this application here at Bitbucket, let's look at the actually we just push it up, so I'm just going to refresh the page, and here it is. So it's not very exciting. In particular, there's this area here that says there isn't a README yet, and we're going to fix that in just a moment. But you can see here, if we can look at, say, the source of the file, this stuff like app, bin, config, db, go back here, you can see that's the same stuff. This is just, in fact, let me hide these guys, hide the hidden files. So this is just the directory structure. So you can see that, in fact, we've successfully pushed up our project to the remote repository. But what I want to do now is fix this issue that that there's no README. In fact, there is a README file. If you ls here, You can see there's readme.rdoc here, and so rdoc is the Ruby documentation format that evidently Bitbucket doesn't understand natively. And that's okay because really rdoc isn't nearly as commonly used as the one we're about to use, which is Markdown. Very nice, lightweight format. Good for things like readmes. Now, the way we're going to make this change from this rdoc format to a Markdown readme is to use a pattern called branching. Now, for this small a change, I would almost never use a branch, but I think it's a good context in which to learn the series of steps for doing a branch and then making an edit and then committing it and then merging the changes back in. This is something it gets especially good at. The way we're going to get started is to create a new branch, which is essentially a copy of our code. Of course, Git is smart. It doesn't copy all of the files. It only copies the things that need to be copied. But we're going to make an area where we can make all kinds of changes, and if we decide we want to abandon them, it's really easy. So we're going to check out a new branch, so we can give checkout a -b. Again, I'm going to type out checkout just because I don't want to rely on people having set up that configuration for the alias, but I recommend doing CO in general. We can just give it any sort of name we want. I'm going to call it modify readme. And we can now see our branches. We've got the master branch, which is the one we pushed up to Bitbucket, and now we've got a new branch, modify readme. So at this point, I'm going to make the change and actually close these guys down. You can see here is readme.rdoc. And I'm going to move this to a different file name. The way to do this in Unix is with mv, but if we do mv, so ordinarily we do mv readme.rdoc and then the new file name, so readme.md. But if we did this in the context of a Git repository, what Git would think happened is that this file, this rdoc file, got deleted and a new file got created. But we really want Git to be thinking of these as the same file. In this case, it doesn't really matter because we're actually just going to replace the content of the file. But this is a good practice in general. Instead of moving things, you want to do git mv. So we'll rename it inside of the repository. And actually want to close this down. Yeah, so now it's complaining because it says, well, you just deleted it. Do I want to keep it open? I do not. I'm going to do this here. There we go. And I'm going to just select all this text and get rid of it. It's just this is the top level heading. So this is hello world, and I'm just going to put a description of what this file is, or what this repository is rather. I like to put in new lines just to keep the formatting nice. With Markdown, it doesn't really matter. These are links. This is the link text, and this is the URL of the link. I like to put the trailing slash for some reason. Okay, so let's make that change. Save the results and see what our status is. Good, so there's a change. You can see that there's a rename. I can make this a little bigger. That we've renamed a file and then modified readme.md. So let's make the commit. Now we haven't actually added these changes. We could do that with a git commit, or rather a git add -A. But there's a way to make this part of the commit. We can do just -A. This will not include files that have been added that are completely out of the repository. But for modifications like this -A will include the changes. So oops, I'm going to do -A-m. These can actually be combined. So this is -A, then the message. Improve the README file. And I'm going to show you. For simplicity, the tutorial starts off with -A, then -m, but they can actually be combined like that. By the way, you might notice that I adopt a convention of using the present tense. Technically speaking, it's the imperative mood. It's a command, improve the README file. You'll see all kinds of different conventions. This is the convention that's actually used internally by Git. So this is the convention that GitHub, among others, recommends. But there's quite a bit of diversity in styles. So we've made these changes on this this branch, this modify README branch. You'll notice that at Cloud9, it actually puts the branch name in the prompt, which is useful. But now we want to incorporate those changes into the master branch and push them up to Bitbucket. So the way we do that is with the git merge command. So first we check out the master branch. Git has tab completion, so do git checkout made tab. And now I'm going to merge in modify README. You can see tab completion is really a lifesaver. Great, and now the change is on the master branch. If you'd like, you can remove the branch that we don't need anymore. You can see here's the modify README here. So I'm just going to get rid of that. This is with the dash lowercase d only deletes the branch. This is deletion only if that branch has already been incorporated into the branch we're deleting from. So in this case, this is a safe operation. It deletes it only if it's already been merged. If you want to delete a branch that that might have changes that haven't been merged, you can use a capital D instead of lowercase. So now I'm going to push these changes up. This Control R, by the way, is an amazing reverse search command. I want to find my last push. I actually want one more. Oops. There it is. So this is our git push -u origin. So we and -- all. So all here is all branches, but we only need the master branch. Origin is Bitbucket, but in fact that's the default. We can just get rid of that. And -u is for upstream or set upstream, which is beyond the scope of this tutorial. Really not that important for our purposes, but you can Google it if you're interested. So in fact, we only need git push. This will push the changes up to Bitbucket. And as I hoped, in fact, it did not prompt me for to say yes to add the SSH key. So if we go up here and refresh, it ought to be a README. Look at that. There it is. That worked. It's pretty exciting. We're done with that for now, so let's just close it down and go back over here. At this point, we're ready to deploy.